Hi, I'm Lars, and this is my land. In my land, I get to do pretty much whatever I want, and today I'm going to tell you in excruciating detail everything you need to know about the Beatles at the Hollywood Bowl. And you're going to listen, because it's my land. Let's get it straight. 2 years, 3 shows, crappy audio, several failed mixing attempts, a mass amount of bootlegs leads into sort of under duress the release of the Beatles at the Hollywood Bowl. But that first show in August 1964, John says hi to the crowd to uproarious applause, but then he stops and he looks beyond into the hills and he says, "How's everyone up in the trees?" And the whole mountain came alive. And that I'm not sure you can capture on tape.
I remember John Lennon saying hi to everybody, and then he said, "How's everybody in the trees?" And the entire mountain came alive. Alive.
Welcome to Annoying Memos Land. Beepity beep beepity beep beep. So if you're new here, I talk about the Beatles, but I have been known to drop a 7-hour video on a TV show that I worked on for so long that if I don't mention it in every video I do, I will be forced to fight or fly. I'm not scared of heights, but seriously, it's important to know that YouTube is very strict about copyrights. Anything more than 3 to 7 seconds of music will result in a copyright claim and blocks the video from being viewed worldwide. If I don't follow these rules, my videos do not exist. I offer complete versions plus a lot more interviews and other stuff on my Patreon, patreon.com/LarsLand. It'd be great if you wanted to support me there, but if not, I would just absolutely love it if you would like and subscribe and all of that jazz. It helps out so much. I do my best to be accurate and thorough. Any corrections will be in a pinned comment. Extra information will be on screen. With a click, it sounds like this. Now, if you want to get in my comments and get all me, it's not my fault if you miss the click. It's not my fault if you miss the click. Now let's go back to my land. Okay, so I thought that this was going to be a nice, cute, easy breezy cover girl 30-minute video. Please. So it's like I don't know who I am. What happened was I started to learn about this performance and album and realized that this is a lot more complex than you might think at first glance. So I decided to just go all in. Not everyone loves this amount of information. So if you just can't do it, I'll give you the speed run and then you can skip to the music or you can leave or whatever, but you're lame and boring. I'm bullying you. Hollywood Bowl performance was arranged so they could perform a live album there. Brian Epstein drives a hard bargain, so TV personality Bob Eubanks refinanced his house to make it happen. 1964 show comes and goes. The recording sucks, so they do take 2 in 1965. They also sucked, but these performances and this promise of a Beatles live album captivates and fascinates fans for years to come. Widely available bootlegs only bolstered its mystique. A couple of fraud attempts at mixing and trying to make this work leaves the tapes in boxes for years. When it was finally released in 1977 through some wizardry by George Martin and Jeff Emmerich. This may or may not for sure definitely has something to do with the fact that other people were selling pre-EMI, pre-contracted Beatles music and releasing it in 1977. Money? Our money. Not your money, our money. But the 1977 album still isn't that great, and it winds up kind of being considered a wart on the Beatles' discography until its re-release in 2016, in which this album is given a place on the shelf. Originally, I said that the 2016 release was the most boring thing about this, and then as I was going through it, I realized that I don't know if there's anything boring about this. But if you want to skip to the music or go away, that's your problem, not mine. I'm bullying you. I'm bullying with love. With love. Chapter 1. Bob Eubanks hocked his house.
Bob, the story's legend now about how you hocked your house in order to have financing to book the first Beatles concert. And some people thought you'd gone out of your mind. And even you had second thoughts.
Yeah. Yeah, we really did.
The purpose was the live album. It was to be for the US market only because Capitol was assuming that because there was already UK releases of these songs, that the interest of the fans wouldn't really be there. Where, oh where, does one record the Beatles live album. Capitol originally wanted to record this in Carnegie Hall, the famous February 12th, 1964 Sullivan Show performance. Oh yeah, I tell you something. So anyway, they weren't allowed to record there, and that's because the American Federations of Musicians refused permissions. I heard refused permission. I heard that they were unable to meet requirements in time. Why? I don't know. I tried to find it, couldn't find any information, just that they didn't. I'm sure I could find more information if I had gone more in depth on my Sullivan Show video, but that video is 18 minutes. I didn't dig, I just gushed. So they nix Carnegie and decide instead to record an August performance at the iconic Hollywood Bowl, which is set against the backdrop of the Hollywood Hills and the famous Hollywood sign. George Martin wasn't a huge fan of recording here. He was concerned about getting good separation. He was concerned about the ability to hear. His concerns were valid. And like I said, Brian was driving home a really hard bargain. So the numbers fluctuate a little bit because it depends on the venue, but he was asking for $25,000 up front plus 50 to percent of the gross sales. Peter Brown, Brian's assistant, said in his book with Stephen Gaines, The Love You Make, Stephen Gaines, although his price was the highest ever quoted for a personal appearance at the time, promoters were clamoring. In the end, some of the arenas and promoters were chosen on the basis of the legendary brown paper bag money, which I never looked up what that means. Let's check. What does brown paper bag money mean? Money made from hustling. So Peter says that everybody was clamoring to get the Beatles, but TV personality known as the host of the Newlywed Game, Bob Eubanks, actually said that during his time as a DJ in LA, that price tag was a lot. Part of his gig was booking talent for concerts. He's the one responsible for booking the Hollywood Bowl shows and the Dodger Stadium show in 1960. I would say that a lot of people took risks on the Beatles, but Bob Eubanks, well, and I know that we aren't here for Bob, but Bob's got a lot to do with this. And he gives great background in an interview with Wink Martindale in 1977 from the original vinyl release.
The Beatles decided to tour. Well, all the concert promoters in town, they said, we're not paying anybody $25,000. So everybody turned them down in Los Angeles. They came to me and they said, okay, you're our last one. Do you want to buy them or not? So my partner Mickey Brown and I, we went out, we hawked our house, and we borrowed $25,000 and said, okay, we'll take them. And that's how it all came about.
And his biggest concern at that point was Brian's heavy demands and the ability to carry through on security. Beatlemania is fun and great and dangerous. For instance, the US tour's opening night at the Cow Palace in San Francisco, fans wound up crushing the Beatles limousine. Security had to pull them out and put them in an ambulance with a bunch of drunk sailors who got pulled out of the show for fighting. They got out safely, but the chaos doesn't stop. Peter Brown says, later that night, diehard fans kept vigils in sleeping bags and folding chairs in the street below the windows of the Hilton Hotel. The crowd surrounding the hotel yelled so loudly, day and night, that a woman guest was beaten and robbed while her cries for help went unheard in the den. And this continues through all of the shows. Larry Kane, who was a reporter who traveled with the Beatles during their US tours, asked John on their plane after the Cow Palace shows, how did it feel out there? And he says, not safe. You can't sing when you're scared for your life. There's a lot of conversations from the Beatles about safety, and it was fun and it was exciting, but there were lots of crazy times. We're a little out of order here, but there was like a close call type of attempt in Montreal where Ringo even had a plainclothes officer sitting near him at the stage.
It's the first time, it's one of the times I was really worried. And then I started getting hysterical because I thought, well, if someone in the audience has a pop at me, what is this guy going to do? He's going to catch the bullet. What is he going to do?
They were feeling scared about assassination attempts even then.
It was that kind of stuff was happening all the time. It was terrifying. Some people would set off firecrackers in the hall and you'd think one of the others had got shot or something.
Which is really hard to talk about, so we're just gonna go. Let's move on with a fun fact about the Hollywood Bowl performance. Well, sort of, the night of the Hollywood Bowl performance. This is from Barry Miles' The Beatles, A Diary, An Intimate Day-by-Day History, which is a hell of a mouthful for a book title. There are two colons in it. So the Beatles stayed at a house in Bel Air that night. The West LA police are called and winds up arresting more than 50 adolescents for violating a 10 p.m. curfew as over 400 fans milled around at the junction of Sunset Boulevard and Bel Air Road hoping to see the Beatles. Over $5,000 worth of damage was done to shrubs and flowers by the fans, and many residents turned on their sprinkler systems to try and ward off the teenagers, but to no avail. Chapter 2. The Screamers and the Singers.
It was the enormous welter of screams from the audience. I mean, it was like putting a microphone by the end of a 747 jet. It was just one continual screaming sound.
Before we hop right into the August 23rd, 1964 show, we know that these performances were a mess sonically. They were also a mess visually, as in the video archives that we have here. I do my best to have B-roll going at some points. Sometimes you see my face, sometimes you don't, just for fun, because boring. I'm gonna probably use as much of this as I can. It might seem a little repetitive, but bitch, it's all we got. It's all we got. We have some upscaled, but it's not great. Tickets for the show go on sale in April. Hundreds of people camp out overnight to get tickets, blah-de-blah. But Brian and Bob were still super concerned about selling out the shows. Terry Brown, who worked with Bob Eubanks at the time, described the situation. There were no real ticket outlets, and we were not set up for credit cards. At the office, we were being besieged with VIP ticket requests. Everyone from Frank Sinatra to the mayor of Los Angeles wanted to be there. And everyone was there, whether or not they were in attendance for the show or if they were on the hill outside it, which is another thing with the security. Bob Eubanks talks about how many marshals he saw out there, and I think it's hard to understand the enormity of the police presence.
The biggest problems were the security problems. That's what I was most frightened about. I saw cars ruined. I saw kids trying to get a view of them up on cars, jumping up and down on hoods and things, not out of maliciousness, just truly out of trying to get a view of it, really. We had more police than we had customers. I spent $10,000 for security just to secure the mountains. And I remember looking up there, and hear all these, you could see the silhouettes of these policemen walking the mountain areas up there. And then one of the county supervisors got frightened, and he brought in 300 marshals at the last minute. Because nobody really knew what we were dealing with.
Nobody remembers the openers from like any of these shows, and they're not schlubs, okay? They open with the Righteous Brothers and Jackie DeShannon, okay? From the Hollywood Bowl website itself, it says, with the Righteous Brothers and Jackie DeShannon as opening acts and 18,700 screaming fans in the audience. The Beatles' 1964 concert became the benchmark for rock and roll at the Bowl. 18,700. Not 17,000 healthy lungs screaming like a 747 jet, which is everything that we hear from George Martin. That's like the most common quote. I've seen 17,000, 17,200, 17,500, and 18,700, okay? I don't know. One of those. And from those thousands of accounts in attendance, there were varying reports on whether or not you can hear the screams, what the experience was like, and I think it's kind of amazing and incredible. Michelle Murata was in attendance in that 1964 show. Her father was Randy Wood, the president of VJ Records, who was responsible for several Beatles releases, including introducing the Beatles. So she had an in. She says, we were in maybe the second row of box seats. You could barely hear them. I remember we did have an escort up to the Bowl because it was just nuts. We had an escort back to our limo, but my mom was freaking because girls were rushing the stage and diving into the pools to get to the Beatles. Larry Kane, the reporter I mentioned before, was a little curmudgeonly about even covering the Beatles. He was all very skeptical of it all. But this performance, he had seen quite a few adults in the crowd, and he wound up feeling maybe more, these are my equals. And his description of the night, I noticed this new dynamic up close when I headed out to see the concert from the fans' vantage point. I climbed to the top of the bowl, a steep climb, and looked down at the gorgeous scene. The Beatles on an outdoor stage under the stars, a phenomenon that would be repeated nights later at the Red Rocks Amphitheater outside of Denver. But the Hollywood Bowl was the best. Something in the air and atmosphere allowed the listener to hear the words as well as the music. Of course, one big reason for the unusually clear sound was the slightly more mature crowd wasn't screaming so loud. They were simply enjoying the Beatles concert for the music. And like these older fans in the audience, I was beginning to appreciate the music for its melodies. As I listened to the words of If I Fell, a beautiful song, and watched the moonlight glow on the faces of the 17,000 gathered at the Hollywood Bowl, I realized for the first time that the skeptical, cynical reporter was beginning to fall for the music of the Beatles. I was even humming out loud along with the tune, and I continued to do so throughout the evening. My pearls. Where are they? Was it the repetition, the hearing of the songs over and over again, or was the music beginning to stir my spirits? Whatever the reason, listening to the music was making me feel happy. Is there a better reason to enjoy someone's talent and artistry? From my high perch, it was also a visual treat. The fans were holding their hands high as if reaching out for manna from heaven, hoping to make a connection with their idols. As I moved down the far aisle and closer to the stage, I noticed Ringo was not missing a cadence. As he struck hard on his drums, he seemed to rubberneck, his face moving up higher to catch the view. I love it when he does that. George, whose guitar was down lower than usual, almost below his hips, seemed to enjoy it the most. It was a beautiful sight. Both the singers and the screamers were in a state of gratification. I think they won him over. The magic in the air ripped away immediately as soon as the Beatles finished their 30-minute set. They gotta get out of the Hollywood Bowl before they're killed.
We talked about the extreme security precautions undertaken both before and after the concerts, and certainly remember this problem better than most because you lived it.
In getting them out of the Hollywood Bowl, there's only one way in and one way out of the Hollywood Bowl, and we had a little sports car set up there. We got them out so good, so fast the first time, that they hung around for a couple of hours, the audience did, thinking they were still there. There was no possible way they could. We had the limousine doors open and everything. We didn't even take them out in the limousines. The next year, we got them out very well the first show, but the kids realized how we were doing it, and there's a little path up the Hollywood Bowl. You drive a little car down, and it's surrounded by bushes on both sides. And I'll never forget the second year, as we drove down that, we were ambushed. Must have been 300 kids came out of those bushes and stopped the car. We had to clear them all away.
Here's what the Beatles said about Hollywood Bowl. Before we get into this, first, Ringo's quote is hilarious. Second, John says several things about the Hollywood Bowl, all of which are contradictory. One of them is from the 1971 interview with Jan Winter, also known as Lennon Remembers. It's a controversial interview. He was very angry during that interview. He recants a lot of things that he says and contradicts. Actually, they all contradict each other because that's human nature. For all the fans, I need you guys to hear this. Okay, this is unrelated to Hollywood Bowl. So we should keep in mind that opinions are fluid and moving and etc. Give them a lot more grace than you're willing to because nothing is concrete. It's just for like everything, especially the breakup stuff. Keep that in mind, would ya? I see it too much. That it's all this person said this in the early 1970s and that's how they felt forever. Guys, the early 1970s, not good for the fucking Beatles. They loved each other. Some of them didn't really like each other. And then people refused to take in other accounts, wind up saying that Paul is lying or that Ringo whitewashes everything, which, both of them whitewash things. They've lost both of their best friends in super difficult circumstances. They want to remember it positively. That's fair. Why can't we take it all into consideration and paint a holistic and complete picture of things that happened with the Beatles? Because I think the hard and fast opinions of this one did this one did that, they said this, John hated this song, John loved this song. I can tell you John hated this song and John loved this song because he said it both. I need all of us, including myself, to be more fluid with our opinions. All right. Now, here's what Ringo said. This quote is funny. We played the Hollywood Bowl. The shell around the stage was great. It was a Hollywood Bowl. These were impressive places to me. I fell in love with Hollywood then, and I'm still in love with Hollywood. Well, Beverly Hills, Hollywood, California. I prefer New York. Anthology Ringo was unhinged. He said the craziest stuff. He really did. It's like, you're sober, but you're not acting sober. So John says, the Hollywood Bowl was marvelous. It was the one we all enjoyed the most. I think even though it wasn't the largest crowd because it seemed so important and everybody was saying things, we got on and it was a big stage and it was great. We could be heard in a place like the Hollywood Bowl, and even though the crowd was wild, good acoustics. There's a couple places where we've been heard quite well, better than we have been for years, but we don't want them, the fans, to be quiet. There's no point in doing a show if they're just going to sit there listening. They can listen to the record. I like a riot. From this 1971 interview, what do you think of those concerts like the Hollywood Bowl? It was awful. I hated it. Some of them were good, but I didn't like the Hollywood Bowl. Some of those big gigs were good, but not many of them. And then there's another quote of him trashing the venue.
Thank you, folks. The Hollywood Bowl was pretty tatty, you know. It's nice to hear. It'll probably go out one day, I suppose. But we're so nervous, you know. It was like going on the Palladium.
I think I gotta take a break. I've only been filming for like 30 minutes, but I'm gonna lose my voice. Shit. Okay, listen. I'm gonna keep losing my voice. It's not gonna get better. So we're just gonna have to deal with it. Let's talk about the 1965 shows. August 29th and 30th to be exact. Oh, by the way, both shows. Tickets were $3 to $7 each. And even heard on that 1977 Bob Eubanks interview that they started at like $4 or $5. No, $3 to $7. Fake news. And of course, both the shows sold out. They grossed, let's see, $156,000, which is about $1.5 million in the year of our Lord 2024. Fans camp out for tickets all the time, but the way that they sold this show was different. We're gonna throw to Past Lars for being a real one. Thank you, Past Lars. The way that they did this was so weird. The radio stations were heavily involved in all of this because Bob Eubanks worked for KRLA. KRLA was presenting the concert, and in the 1964 show, there was no competition. It was just KRLA. But then this other radio station comes along in 1965, and it's called KHJ. And so now there's suddenly competition. It'll be relevant. This is how they sold the tickets. KRLA takes out full-page ads in the Los Angeles Times with a coupon that fans had to mail in on a specific date in order to get their ticket. KHJ gets competitive. They sent out 1,500 coupons and were able to purchase 1,100 tickets to give out to fans. They were giving out more tickets than KRLA. The 29th show, they send across a plane with a banner that says, Boss Radio KHJ brings you the Beatles. And Bob, who was on the stage at this time, looks up and says, can you believe that's coming from a radio station that can't even afford a fourth call letter? Burn. Some fans remember this process. It was so wholesome. Sharon Weiss says, my parents didn't subscribe to the Times, so I had to go out and buy a copy, get my mother to write a check and take it back to the mailbox. It couldn't be mailed before a certain date, so I had to wait for that. I had asked for $7 tickets, but they got $5 and they sent back a refund check to cover the difference. Barbara Chamberlain, on the other hand, actually had a slumber party the night before the newspaper ad was to appear. She says, we got up at the crack of dawn to get the coupon and we all walked to the post office bright and early and mailed our coupon with payment. We were so excited when our tickets came in the mail. We didn't know what it was like to see the Beatles up close, so we were happy as can be just to see them. The openers, once again, completely forgotten, were the King Curtis Band, Sounds Incorporated, who actually did the brass accompaniment on Good Morning, Good Morning, and the Discotheque Dancers, Brenda Holloway, and Cannibal and the Headhunters. The whole mountain came alive in 1964, but Barbara Chamberlain says it wasn't any less occupied in 1965. I remember there were fans sitting on the hill above the Hollywood Bowl to watch the show. There was super excitement all around us, the magical happy feeling of Beatlemania. And she said that she was able to hear the show. The screaming did interfere with how well, but yes, I could hear. My friend Linda says no to this question, but I do remember hearing them and singing along. I will always remember Paul introducing Cant Buy Me Love by asking the audience to join in and to stomp your hands and clap your feet. Barb said we're friends now. She's not Barbara. She's Barb now. She said that her friends actually left the show a little bit early to see if they could catch the Beatles on their way out, and they even said that they were able to touch the car. Sigourney Weaver was there. Sigourney Weaver. Here's some video footage of her. She was in the 8 Days a Week documentary that came out in 2016, but Ron Howard was too good and put music underneath it, so we can't play it for you, but I would love to. Here's what she said in, I think, a Jimmy Fallon interview.
There you are. John! You look exactly the same. John!
Terry Tariba had a really interesting account of this. She said okay, I'm reading it. I was all dressed up going to my cheap seat and I saw some people I knew who were in the expensive seats. They passed me one of their tickets and I sat in an empty box. Then these people came who were in their late 20s or 30s and of course they seemed ancient to me. They were probably lawyers in the music business with their wives and dates. I was in their box and they came really late. They were kind enough to let her stay in the box with them where she remained for the duration of the show. I see her quote all the time where it's, did she scream? Of course not, she says. It's not dignified. Plus, I was not motivated by the Mop Tops at the time. I preferred the Rolling Stones. For me, it was a fun experience because of my seating. It was cute, but it wasn't incredible because they weren't yet the Beatles that they grew to be as their music becomes more complex. I was more entranced by people looking at me alone in my box. It just went on and nobody came. It was a crazy lucky thing that happened to me. The very beginning of many things like that. Sherry Lutz, girl, we owe you. Miss Sherry Lutz, she typed up her entire experienced. She scrapbooked, archived some articles, and it went away in a box, never to be seen again. Just kidding. She found it and she posted it online, and she is adorable. One thing that she said about the openers was, finally it began. First King Curtis, who's he? Then some corny dancers, Cannibal and the Headhunters, and Brenda Holloway. I'm gonna read most of it because it's really sweet and funny. She says, on the freeway, we watched people driving. There were some weird ones, so we had something to exclaim over. None of us actually believed we were going to see the Beatles for real. Ever since May 8, when we mailed our money order special delivery for the tickets at 12:06 at night, right at the post office on Santa Fe, we have been waiting for this day. They got their $6 tickets, not $7, and she said that she was disappointed, but she kind of let it go as she found out that her friends were getting $4 and $5 tickets, so she counted her blessings. Then all the KRLA DJs came out with British flags and introduced the Beatles. All of a sudden, they were playing Twist and Shout. Almost everyone was screaming. I spent the whole thing on the edge of the bench. They wore black pants and I'm reading this, beige Hitler-like jackets, which I guess is not, like, is it not untrue? Is that problematic? I've seen in other accounts Nehru jackets. That's the only one that brought up Nazis. With black buttons. John had a corduroy hat on. George's and Ringo's hair looked too long, which is so funny. After their first song, they took the lowest bow, like they were enjoying every minute. I wish I could remember all they said, but I can't. Paul sang She's a Woman, and then they did I Feel Fine. Before Dizzy Miss Lizzy, John said something like it was from one of their albums. I'm sure everyone there knew that. They were great when they played Ticket to Ride. Ringo just drums away. He is so good. He smiled a lot. George came up then and said something and then sang Everybody's Trying to Be My Baby. Paul sort of waltzed back to an amplifier and turned on a button or something. After the song, a guy came out and did something too. In parentheses, can't even work his own equipment. Pause. This rant also needed, please stay for this one. People have been affectionately joking about the Beatles since the dawn of time, and which was in 1957. July 6, 1957. And I make fun of them on Twitter all the time. I make jokes and people are like, oh, fuck you. And I called Paul a shithead the other day, just joking, and people got really mad. I remember being asked by a Gen Xer one time, like, why do you guys make fun of the Beatles? I don't understand it. It's disrespectful. If you think that the Beatles wouldn't have a sense of humor about themselves, you are so wrong. I don't think you've watched any of their interviews or documentaries or read anything about them. It's okay for us to call George pouty and grumpy and to call Ringo spacey and silly. It's okay for us to call them jokey names because they called us apple scruffs. They gave as good as they got. It's a really silly thing to police how people affectionately care about the Beatles. Relax. Get over yourself. Bitch, I said what I said. One time John went up to the pool and pointed to it, looked at Paul and George, and then at us. I wonder if he wanted someone to jump in, and then he made a jumping motion like he was going to leap in. Ringo got to sing I Want to Be Your Man. I don't see how he can sing and play drums at the same time. When he was finished, George, John, and Paul raised their hands to him. He was on a platform and Ringo took a bow. During A Hard Day's Night in Help, Sue and I sang along. We were sort of in an ecstasy. George would wave once in a while when a rest in his lead part would allow it, and everyone would scream louder. Toward the end on Help, kids started running down the aisles and some were waving their arms. The guards and policemen started running around blocking girls. One jumped in the pool, but all she accomplished was a good soaking. John put down his guitar and fixed the mic in front of the organ, and they started I'm Down. Everyone knew that that was the last song because Dave Hull gave us the information on the radio. John played with his elbow on the organ, then all of a sudden they were leaving. A guy ran on stage and shook their hands, but we don't know who it was. Then they were gone. Sue was yelling, "They're gone!" I think I was saying something of the same. Girls were jumping in the pool. Heck, if I know why they were gone. They probably wanted to touch their equipment. A man came on the loudspeaker and said that the Beatles were gone and on the freeway just a minute after they left. On the way home, we heard Yesterday, the Beatles' new song. Paul sings and there's no guitar or drums, but a string quartet. It's one of the most beautiful songs they have ever done. I do not think we will ever forget this night as long as we live. So while What's-Her-Face said that the Beatles were cute, Bob Eubanks remembers this night as pretty hectic.
As intense as the first?
Even more intense because it was after the first year, other acts started touring then. And the concert thing started to become a real thing. And they were throwing jelly beans and things of that sort. And everybody kind of really got into it. And so I think the intensity increased the second year.
The shows were only 30 minutes or less than, and that kind of comes up in another review. But the Beatles talk about how things sped up. They went faster, 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 which is very common in live shows. It's not anything bad or wrong. What matters is that Ringo is the fucking click. On a more serious note, Michael Kier was in college in 1965 and he had a job at Disneyland, but he also took another job ushering at the Hollywood Bowl. My most vivid memory of working the Beatles concert was the contrast to an experience I had less than 3 weeks before of another night working the Bowl when the Watts riots broke out in LA. What a contrast. One night, sketchy reports coming in about fires breaking out over the city, people rioting in the streets, shots being fired from freeway overpasses, wondering about the chances of being shot driving home, and the joyous, raucous celebration of a night with the Beatles a few short weeks later. Chapter 3, bound to be bootlegged. Let's just get it out of the way. The August 29th recording, unusable, throw it out, doesn't matter. George Martin talks about what he was dealing with bringing this tape into the studio. It was a sketchy situation. He says he arranged for Capitol to provide their own engineers. They used a 3-track half-inch tape and the separation wasn't great. To begin with, we had the voices in the center with a mixture of drums, bass, and guitar on separate side tracks, but pervading the whole lot was the enormous welter of screams from the audience. It was like putting a microphone at the tail of a 747 jet. It was one continual screaming sound, and it was very difficult to get a good recording. He says that the 3-track was standard for that time. You would record the band on stereo on 2 tracks and you would keep the voice separated on the 3rd so that you could bring it up or down in the mix. But at the Hollywood Bowl, they didn't use 3-track in quite the right way. I didn't have too much say in things because I was a foreigner, but they did some very bizarre mixing. In 1977, when I was asked to make an album from the tapes, I found guitars and voices mixed on the same track. And he says, they were a great live band, especially when you consider that one of their problems was that they couldn't hear themselves. John says that being recorded was anxiety inducing. If we knew we were being recorded, it was death. We were so frightened. You could never hear yourself. And you knew that they were fucking it up on the tape anyway. There was no bass and they never recorded the drums. You could never hear them. I didn't like the Hollywood Bowl. It was awful. I hated it. Those plays were... This is the 4th negative one. Sorry. I've read this a bunch of times. It's still funny. Okay. Sorry. Stop laughing. Billie Eilish. Quit. Okay. Those places were built for fucking orchestras, not groups. Some of the gigs were good, but not many. Paul didn't mind the screams so much. He says, people were saying, doesn't it drive you mad, all those girls screaming? We didn't mind it because it covered a multitude of sins. We were out of tune. It didn't matter. We couldn't hear it, nor could they. Ringo is only ever applauded for what he did. He did very well because he couldn't hear and he was very necessary for the Beatles to be able to keep on track. We always hear that anecdote that he watched their butts go up and down to know where they were in the song, but also he says, there was nothing else I could do through the numbers bar, play the offbeat and try to lip read where they were up to in the songs or read by the movements where the hell they were. If I tried to do anything on the toms, it was lost in the din, which is the second time we've heard that phrase today.
John, Paul and George will be standing at microphones in front of a screaming crowd of 60,000 and Ringo will be at the back on the drum. And Ringo said to me, it was very difficult following. He said, I couldn't do anything clever. I couldn't do great drum kicks or anything, or drum rolls or fills. So I just had to hang on to that backbeat all the time to keep everybody together.
In 1971, John sets off a minor frenzy in that interview by saying that, what is it called? The Beatles in Italy was a live recording. It was just a compilation album that went out in Italy. And he says, there's one in Italy apparently that somebody recorded there. And then after Phil Spector worked on Let It Be in 1970, he was still working with George and John a lot at that point. He took a look at it and said, no. Then it sits in a box for years, but not really because the bootleggers had a hold of it. They got it. Voyle Gilmore, he was an audio and recording man at Capitol Records and he produced the original Hollywood Bowl recordings. He says, the Hollywood Bowl has a pretty good stereo sound system, so we plugged our mics right in there. I didn't do an awful lot. There wasn't much we could do. They just played their usual show and we recorded it. It wasn't that bad. I kept thinking, maybe we'll get permission to release the tapes. So I took them back to the studio and worked on it a while. I worked on the applause, edited it down, made it play, and EQ'd it quite a bit. The Beatles heard it and they all wanted tape copies. I had 5 or 6 copies made and sent it over. That's where the bootlegs must have come from. We had a system at Capitol and we knew where all of our copies were. The Beatles said they liked the tapes, that it sounded pretty good, that they were surprised, but they still didn't want to release it. Didn't matter. They were widely in circulation. I don't know all of the people who bootlegged, but I know that one of them was Rizzardo Records in their liner notes. Hilarious. This is, by by the way, from Bootlegged, The Rise and Fall of the Recording Industry by Halen Clinton. He says, their Beatles album was packed with extras, such as a mimeograph paper insert with hair drawn on it, advertised as a free Beatles wig on the cover, and a press release declaring, Wizardo Records discovered the Beatles at the Hollywood Bowl in 1964. Knowing a good thing when we saw one, we took the liberty of releasing this record album. We hope you enjoy listening to it as much as we enjoy making money. George said that he had an acetate of it, and he had the tapes in England, and he said that it sounded really bad. He's including even the 1977 one. He says, the thing is, it's only important historically, but as a record, it's not very good. While each of the Beatles was on EMI Capitol, the LP wouldn't have been released because we didn't like it. So Voyle Gilmore said that they liked it, but apparently they didn't. Remember that contradiction thing that I said before? It's one of those. It's somewhere in between. But as soon as we left and we lost control of our material, it was released. The sound quality on the album sounds just like a bootleg, but because Capitol's bootlegging it, it's legitimate. So I am just realizing that I did not include the sound of the bootleg pretty much at all, but that's okay because I can play right now. Chapter 4, Under Duress, the 1977 release.
I believe that they're more popular now than they ever have been, and I believe their popularity continues to increase. I believe the album will be a monster.
It's 1977. The Beatles still haven't released a live album, and EMI was about to get beat to the punch because of a small-time entrepreneur named Paul Murphy, who purchased King Taylor's tapes of the Beatles performing at the Star Club in Hamburg, which is a word I cannot pronounce properly. Last video, Lars, thank you. A couple words out there I will never be able to pronounce properly because of reasons.
Hamburg.
That's what 5 years of German get you. You can't do it correctly anymore. That tape was pre-EMI, so it doesn't have the same protections. He can sell it. He did wind up approaching EMI and saying, hey, I have this. You want to sell it? And they said, we don't like it. We don't want it. And he was like, cool. To be clear, one of the sources, Halen Clinton, says that EMI looking at releasing a live album in 1977 before they knew this. So some people say that it was before, some people say that it was after. That's one source. I don't know. But when he decided to release this, EMI sent out an injunction to stop him. He responded to the injunction by saying, the Beatles have never said that they would not give their permission for the record to be released, and I have never made a secret of my intention to put out the tapes. So they went to court, but ultimately the judge dismissed the case, and it went out, and it was the first, I guess, official bootleg of the Beatles widely in circulation. And all the other Beatles pre-EMI recordings became fair game, but that, my friends, is a different video. As far as the Beatles' stance towards bootlegs, John collected as many as he could. Paul says that he had no problem with it, but his attorney insists that he does. And Ringo got bashed in the book, but it's because he bashed bootleg. It's kind of intense. Let's read it. Ringo Starr, on the other hand, a man who felt that keeping time on his friends' recording sessions entitled him to be a multimillionaire, saw nothing ironic about his own somewhat malevolent attitude toward them. By the way, they chopped up this quote a little bit, so you can see where the ellipses are here. Bootlegs I hate because the product is usually not a good representation of the artist. It's just some crumb who doesn't do anything making all the bread. I wouldn't mind a bootleg if it went to charity somewhere, but all those bootleggers are very negative people. They just pick up something by luck and shove it out and make all the bread, and it's not a good product, and they're conning the kids. It's usually like some hip guy who's putting out the bootlegs, but he's the closest thing to the fat cigar I've ever heard of. He's done nothing, no talent, and he just makes all the bread. Take a shot whenever he says bread. I wish that people would stop buying them, then the whole market would fall through. Motivating factors aside, EMI reaches out to Voyle Gilmore and says, hey, y'all actually have track of your tapes? Can you bring them up to us? So he pulled them out, and Basker Menon of Capitol went to George Martin and said, hey, can you look at these? Maybe they have some potential here. And George Martin said, hey, buddy, I remember these. There's not much going on. But because Basker's a friend, he decided to take a look at it. And actually, he found that he was wrong. I said to Basker, I don't think you've got anything here at all. There have been an awful lot of bootleg recordings made of the Beatles concerts around the world, and they've been in wide circulation. But when I listened to the Hollywood Bowl tapes, I was amazed at the rawness and vitality of the Beatles singing. So George Martin pulls in Jeff Emmerich, and they went to work transferring that 3-track tape onto a 24-track and reducing 22 songs to 13. Voyle Gilmore doesn't like some of the way that they did this. I thought that the first concert was a little better than the second. I don't know if I would have put them together like they did, because doing it that way sacrificed an album. They really could have made 2 albums. And he says some tracks had to be discarded because the music was obliterated by the screams. But George and Jeff were satisfied, and those guys are are good. They're good at their jobs, but they're not as good as the Beatles, and they had to sign off before anything happened. So George Martin, who was actually going to New York City, calls John and says, hey, let's meet up. He hands him the tape and says, I was skeptical too. I want you to hear it after I've gone. You can be as rude as you like, but if you don't like it, give me a yell. I spoke to him the following day and he was delighted with it. The reaction of George and Ringo was much cooler. I had a video interview with Paul somewhere. It was a Wings interview because Denny was there. And he said like that he hadn't heard it, that he'd heard of some bootleg somewhere. I thought I pulled it, but I can't find it. If I find it, I'll put it in here. But I have another quote where he says, I haven't heard it. Jeff Emmerich keeps telling me to because he did it. He thinks it's good, but I'm just not that bothered. I've got a lot of those tapes anyway in my private collection. I've got original demos and original tapes, so I've heard a lot of them, but I must have heard it because I'm on it. Okay, so I know it doesn't sound like I'm losing my voice because I'm good at projecting. Thank you, drama lessons at 7, but I'm about to lose it. So we are going to use my old footage. We had fun, you and me. We did. See you later. Let's take a look at this cover. Seems like pretty unremarkable. Literally nothing to remark about. I gave it zero thought. Guess what? Perhaps not having access to the complete original Beatles Hollywood Bowl tickets, or maybe because the original tickets did not have a photo on them, they made up their own imitations using ticket styles from the Shea Stadium concerts as well as the 1975 Hollywood Bowl shows by Joan Baez and America. In the process, they incorrectly printed the days as Sat instead of Sun on both tickets. So they were both on Sunday. In this picture, the first 2 tickets are used for the album cover, but with one final change. Capitol deleted their logo, which was on the earlier designs. The third ticket is interesting because it actually shows the correct day of Sun, and because the Capitol logo is gone, it means that it was made after the other versions. They made the right one and the wrong artwork was sent to the printer. Whoops! It turns out that Beatles fans were nitpicky back in 1977, just like they are in my comment section. Eric Scythe sent this letter to Capitol Records in 1977. Gentlemen, although I am very pleased with my new record, The Beatles at the Hollywood Bowl, I have to inform you of a mistake on the cover. Though you probably are aware of it, I will inform you of it in case you didn't already know. On the cover of the record, you show 2 tickets to the concert the Beatles did, or imitations of them. Well, if you look at any calendar for those 2 years, you will see that the 2 dates are Sunday, not Saturday. Then, if you will permit yourself to look at the back cover and read the dates under the titles, you see August 23rd, 1964, and then a new date, August 30th, 1965. Since the Beatles only did those 2 concerts in those 2 years, what are the correct dates the tickets should read? Please clear up this matter with me by writing to me. My name is Eric Scythe. Thank you. They didn't give a fuck. It was never misprinted or anything like that. It was probably too trivial. Let's run through these stats. The Beatles at the Hollywood Bowl was released May 4th, 1977. The runtime is 33 minutes and 15 seconds. Produced by Voyle Gilmore, 1964. Recording engineer, 1964 concert, Hugh Davies. Recording engineer, 1965 concert, Peter Abbott. It was produced by George Martin, remixed by Jeff Emmerich at the Air Studios in London, January 1977. It was mastered by Wally Trigo and Jeff Emmerich. The art direction was Roy Kohara, who didn't check before sending it to the printer. It was reviewed positively. We'll get there in a minute.
I would like to add a caveat to this because while I say that it was reviewed positively and overall the reviews were rather good, I would say that as fans and the more serious fans, definitely the people who are here watching this, weren't happy with this one, okay? And I probably don't need to explain this to you, but I just wanted to say, I wanted to explain it to you.
Charted number 1 in the UK albums chart and number 2 in the US Billboard 200, certified platinum in Canada and US and gold in France and UK. And the liner notes written by George Martin read as, over 12 years ago, the Beatles appeared for their first time at the Hollywood Bowl in Los Angeles. It was not so long after they made their first impact on the United States, but already 2 years after I had signed them to a recording contract for EMI. Frankly, I was not in favor of taping their performance. I knew the quality of the recording could not equal what we could do in the studio, but we thought we would try anyhow. Technically, the results were disappointing. The conditions for the engineers were arduous in the extremes. The chaos, I might almost say panic, that reigned at these concerts concerts was unbelievable unless you were there. Only 3-track recording was possible. The Beatles had no foldback speakers, so you could not hear what they were singing. And the eternal shriek from 17,000 healthy young lungs made even a jet plane inaudible. A year later, in 1965, John, Paul, George, and Ringo appeared again at the Hollywood Bowl, and again, Capitol taped the show for posterity, and there the tapes remained for over a decade. Neither the boys nor I considered that they should be used because they consisted of titles that had already been issued in studio recordings. We often spoke of making a live recording, and in fact, the ill-fated Let It Be album began as an attempt to make a live record of new material. It was with some misgiving, therefore, I agreed to listen to those early tapes at the... You know what, guys? I'm gonna skip through some of this stuff. Those of us who were lucky enough to be present at a live Beatle concert, be it in Liverpool, London, New York, Washington, Los Angeles, Tokyo, Sydney, or wherever, will know how amazing, how unique those performances were. It was not just the voice of the Beatles, it was the expression of the young people of the world. And for the others who wondered what on earth all the fuss was about, this album may give a little clue. It may be a poor substitute for the reality of those times, but it is now all there is. In the multi-platinum, sophisticated world we live in today, it is difficult to appreciate the excitement of the Beatles' breakthrough. My youngest daughter, Lucy, now 9 years old, once asked me about them. "You used to record them, didn't you, Daddy?" she asked. "Were they as great as the Bay City Rollers?" "Probably not," I replied. "Someday she will find out." Those who clamor for a Beatle reunion cannot see that it can never be the same again. It's a hard sentence to read. Knowing what would happen 3 years later, the boys in their own way gave a great deal of their lives to us by being Beatles, and now they have found their own individual selves. Good luck to them. I'm very proud to have been a part of their story. Thank you, John, Paul, George, and Ringo. George Martin. Just want to mention an acetate of the 1964 concert sold for $23,838 in February 1922. According to Variety, the disc, one of just 3 known to exist, features the full 12-song, 29-minute concert along with stage comments from the group. According to the announcement, the acetate was directly from reel-to-reel tape 3 days after the concert. There was also a Hollywood Bowl promotional 8-track tape and a promotional CD, and this album wasn't officially available on CD until 2016. From Rolling Stone, the new Rolling Stone album guide, Beatles reissues are a story in themselves. Over the years, Capitol has cranked out Beatles anthologies from every conceivable angle. Love songs, real music, rock and roll music, rarities, and so on. Hardly any of them have been rip-offs. However, Elvis Presley should be so lucky as to have his legacy preserved with this much care. Hollywood Bowl is a loving tribute to the Screaming Girl fans who drown out the band in these 1964-65 shows. Those girls were heroes on the rock and roll frontier, and they deserve to be the lead instrument on a Beatles album of their own. Live at the Star Club is a dull live set from the tail end of the group's early Hamburg days, right about the time that the Beatles were making it at home and going through the motions in Hamburg. From Robert Kraiskow's Consumer Guide, the sound rings clearly and powerfully through the shrieking. The segues are brisk and the punch-ins imperceptible, and the songs capture our heroes at their highest, so we're talking about a different kind of hero here. Furthermore, though the musicianship is raw, arrangements are tighter, faster actually, than on record. Now, this is an interesting addition. I don't know if anyone likes to hate on short songs or quick sets. Ramones haters should note that 13 tunes takes less than 29 minutes, including patter. From Michael Hahn's review in The Guardian, this is from his 2016 review, but it will come back later. Certainly, anyone hearing the original Hollywood Bowl album for the first time is liable to be taken aback. That's not because of the band, but because of the dominant sound of the album that wasn't the Beatles, but the screams of thousands and thousands of teenagers, screams that blanket the music in sheets of white noise for all the world, like William Reed's feedback on Psycho Candy. Chapter 5. The Unwanted Child, 2016 release. I'm not sure exactly what precipitated. It was probably the 8 Days a Week documentary by Ron Howard that started the want to redo the Hollywood Bowl track. Capitol reaches out to Giles Martin, George's son, and says, "Hey, you got the goods. Can you take a look at this?" And he says, this is from Wired magazine, "What became apparent when you compared it to what came out in 1977 is how hard Ringo is hitting the drums, how hard the band were really digging in. We didn't really know about that before. You take these layers of natural tape effects away to get to the heart of the performance, and when you get there, you actually hear this dynamic." From Wired, they say, to do that, James Clark, a systems analyst at Abbey Road Studios, developed a demixing process to separate each instrument and vocal track from the cacophony. He isolated everything Ringo, Harrison, Paul McCartney, and John Lennon played and sang, separated it from the din of the crowd, and effectively created clean tracks to remaster. Fittingly, Clarke's audio modeling process used spectrograms, imagery that you might associate with ghost hunting, to bring the spirit of these live performances back to life. From the Axis interview with Giles Martin, he said the crowd noise is a massive problem. All 3 Hollywood Bowl shows are drenched in screams across all tracks. The audience was much louder than the band. That said, I'd been working closely with a boffin called James Clarke, developing remix technology. The ability separates sounds from a single mono track. The original intention for the software was to use this for separating vocal from instruments, drums from guitars, etc. I suggested that we should try this tech on the newly acquired Hollywood Bowl tapes to see if we could at least reduce or try to separate the screams. From adjusting the program to suit, I worked alongside engineer Sam O'Kell to remove layers of crowd noise, which then allowed us to treat the band's sound before putting the crowd back in. Now, I know that this is a lot of technical conversation, but I think we need to stop and talk about this and make sure that we understand what brought that 2016 release to fruition. This is what I'm going to listen to here in a minute. I talk extensively about the screams. That is something that was brought through everything. So we need to talk about what allowed us to be able to listen to it in such clear, great quality now.
If I play you Long Tall Sally, it's the Beatles live, but a mass with a bunch of screams. And if I play the new version, you suddenly have a much clearer Paul McCartney. You can hear the band play live, and it's like being there with the band.
The modeling process involves using samples of each instrument to help the software determine what to look for and pull out into its own track. If the recording didn't have a clean enough version of the track Clarke wanted to isolate, he used session recordings to build those audio fingerprints. I went back to the studio versions to build the models, he said. They're not as accurate as there were usually temporal and tuning changes between the playing in the studio and playing live, but the Beatles were pretty spot on between studio and live versions. After creating spectrogram models of each instrument, he loaded the files into what he calls his little controller program. After a few hours, it gave him a clean track of the instrument he modeled. All of those tracks went to the mixing engineer. From the start, Martin hoped to make the recording as lifelike and accurate as possible. I wanted to know what it was like watching the Beatles play live, he says.
Was it possible to capture, even in an album, the electricity in the air those nights during the summers of 1964 and 65?
I think because we've all been to concerts now, and we all feel that fervor that goes on, that it's possible. It was the most, it gives me goosebumps to even talk about it, to hear that many people so totally involved in a particular circumstance. I mean, there was total involvement. There was no one standing around bored or anything of that sort talking. It was just like they had them totally. It was frightening.
There weren't technically liner notes, but July 20th, 2016, there was a press release announcing the Beatles, the Live at the Hollywood Bowl, and the documentary. The press release insisted that this was an entirely new release, directly sourced from the original 3-track tapes of the album, not the 1977 record. This is not a re-release of 1977, which I think I have misspoken in the earlier part of this video. So if you got me in my comments, producer Giles Martin and engineer Sam O'Kell remixed and mastered the recordings at Abbey Road Studios, plus the 4 bonus tracks. This is what Giles Martin said in that press release. A few years ago, Capitol Studios called saying they discovered some Hollywood Bowl 3-track tapes in their archives. We transferred them and noticed an improvement over the tapes we've kept in the London archive. Alongside this, I've been working for some time with a team headed by technical engineer James Clarke on demix technology. I'm going to cut right here because we just talked about this. Now there's improved clarity, and so the immediacy and visceral excitement can be heard like never before. My father's words still ring true, but what we hear now is the raw energy of 4 lads playing together to a crowd that loved them. This is the closest you can get to being at the Hollywood Bowl at the height of Beatlemania. We hope you enjoy the show. The 2016 Live at the Hollywood Bowl was released September 9th, 2016 on CD, digital download, and streaming. The vinyl release was November 18th, 2016, with a 180-gram gatefold vinyl LP, 24-page booklet, because they always have those, and an essay by music journalist Dave Frick, or Freak or something. Cover art is a photo by the Beatles' then US tour manager, Bob Bonus. There were 17 songs, 6 of which are covers. The runtime is 43 minutes and 34 seconds. It charted 3rd in the UK albums chart and 7th on the Billboard 200. The reception and reviews is pretty good. AllMusic, Stephen an AllMusic review by Stephen Thomas Erlewine got through it. Giles Martin remastering does Live at the Hollywood Bowl a world of good, managing to somewhat suppress the thundering cheers without excising them at all, then boosting the Beatles so it's possible to focus on their crackerjack interplay. Perhaps the Beatles weren't able to hear themselves well on stage, but that's hard to discern from these performances, which are tight and swinging with the band clearly deriving energy from the audience. That's the primary difference between Live at the Hollywood Bowl and the 2 volumes of Live at the BBC. No matter how excellent those BBC collections are, there's no sense of kinetic connection between the Beatles and their fans, and that's something that's on ample display in Live at the Hollywood Bowl. Decades later, it's still thrilling to hear the band and the crowd feed off the excitement of the other. Remember what I read from before. The Guardian review by Michael Hahn, he says, "It's more revelatory hearing the Beatles as a live rock and roll band than it is hearing most of the studio sketches on anthologies. They are hard and rough, but the harmonies are sweet. Both Lennon and McCartney sound a little fatigued by the whole circus, but you certainly wouldn't have noticed if you'd been in the crowd. In fact, at times their voices sound better for the material than on the studio versions. McCartney's tired rasp on She's a Woman is especially fabulous." I actually agree with that. He bemoans and goes over and over that it's not a new album, and he wonders why the Hollywood Bowl. He talked a little bit about what was mentioned before. The Beatles have released a lot of stuff, so why not the Hollywood Bowl? He says, "Yet still the Hollywood Bowl album remained mothballed. It's plain that all concerned the album was not good enough to sit alongside the rest of the catalog," talking about the 2009 remasters, etc. "Otherwise, why keep it away from the public for so long? But with the public appetite for official Beatles products seemingly insatiable, here was an album that was sitting around doing nothing." Just as an interesting addition, this is what Giles Martin said on that Axis interview I mentioned earlier. "Of all the live Beatles recordings, the Hollywood Bowl tapes are the best from an audio point of view. The Bowl tracks are not featured on the new record as much." Oh, let's see here. He says, "The official releases should sound as good as possible, and if certain tracks don't pass the threshold, then there's little point in putting them out. Our responsibility is to make sure that the quality of the tracks that we release for sale appeal to music fans and collectors alike." Remember, Beatles reissues are a story in themselves. Over the years, Capitol has cranked out Beatles anthologies from every conceivable angle. And I just want to finish with what Michael Hahn says, "The way Live at the Hollywood Bowl is creeping out years after the rest of the catalog was remastered, and as an accompaniment to a documentary, doesn't rehabilitate it. It only serves to further its position as the unwanted child, the disowned foundling, highlighting not the brilliance of the Beatles, but the needless rapaciousness of Apple Corps." So is the unwanted child worthy of its title? Is it just a cash grab? And now, my finger's bleeding. I literally just scuffed it moments ago. So we're going to start with the music. I would like to gently remind everyone, copyrighted music, more than 3 to 7 seconds of it, will result in my videos being blocked from being seen by anyone, anywhere. This is not a monetization issue. I mean, yeah, it is, but my Pet Sounds video is demonetized, and a lot of people don't think that there's enough music in that one, so... But listen, this is what we're dealing with. And if you want to watch the complete versions, please go to my Patreon. Otherwise, take it up with YouTube. I know you guys hate it. Trust me. Because of this fun little barrier to entry, I place interrupters. Sometimes I will be having a thought and music will be cut in there, and it's only 3 seconds, and it might be a little jarring, but it is the best I can do, and usually it's explaining what I'm trying to explain. On occasion, there might just be a video, and I so apologize for this, but it is usually to prove a point of what I'm trying to show, or, okay, I'm sorry. I usually introduce the songs. Yeah, whatever, just do it anyway. Twist and Shout. Just thinking about them not being able to hear themselves. It's got to be easy. The first 30 seconds you're starting off, you know exactly how Twist and Shout goes, so it's not that bad yet, but still, they sound good. The energy there is really palpable. And remember, this is only a few months after Sullivan. I'm going to move my computer a little bit closer. If the shadow on my face is weird now, it's because I'm trying to move my computer closer to get a little bit better volume for y'all. I wish that I had been there, or I wish that I could even comprehend the magic of a live show with them. I've been to lots of great live shows, but nothing like... Nothing like the Beatles. Things that go without saying for 100, Alex, please. I always can almost hear them. Bum, 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 bum. They're so... So the Temptations, other doo-wop Motown bands, groups, they have choreographed bits. And our guys, they do have the choreograph on Baby's Got Black. I like sad girls, and I cannot... In Babies in Black, they do the turn. Well, this they do kind of on Sullivan, the bum, 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 bum. And it's such a palpable action that you can hear it almost here, right? Even if you're not looking for it. I'm really impressed at the depth and dimension of the audience here. It's got such a good range. It's very impressive. It sounds like you're there. She's a Woman. I just talked about She's a Woman in my most recent video, The Beatles for Sale Deserves an Apology. Go watch it. It is a good video, in my opinion. Is it as good as Bangladesh? None of them are. Dang. This song is really fun because I think it really shows a lot of experimentation for Paul on a Beatles song vocally. And that is a pretty big step for him to go from pop to bringing in his sort of screamer, real rock and roll voice. The audience thing, you can hear whistles and stuff. I'm not sure how well you can hear it here. Sorry, but it's just... And speaking of separation, the separation is really great here. The separation between John and George. The vocals, obviously the percussion. Ringo can't hear himself. He says that he can't hear anything. I am the fucking click. No click tracks, no timing, just him. Okay, sorry for the stare off, but anyway, song's good. Just checking on the audio, just trying my best. It's obviously not experimental, his vocals. Sorry, I have to adjust here. It's obviously not experimental because he's been doing this the whole time. It's just so experimental for a Beatles track, this level. And it is very cool. And he sounds really great. I remember reading somewhere that they sound tired. I don't really... Tired? Wow. So we are now at them talking at the end. Some of that patter.
I'd like to do a song now that's from an album of ours. An LP.
An LP, an album. I have to admit, the names of the album, LP, that kind of stuff, that threw me off for a while.
I have a song called Dizzy Miss Lizzy.
Obviously, this is not a Beatles song, but it is so ingrained in my head at this point that it is. Let's listen for that percussion again. It's hard not to give them the credence that they deserve when John Lennon does that. You make me dizzy, Miss Lizzy, the way you rock and roll. 12 words to pause and have to say, damn, 12 words. Once again, The point that I belabor every single video is that John hated his voice. Boom, 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 boom. I know that his insecurity is career long, but I do believe that it got a little bit worse later on. Does he not understand how he sounds? He has to know that it objectively sounds good. The screams, the audience is so distinct here. It sounds really great. Sounds really great. I don't know. That probably sounded really stupid. It does, though. When I was growing up, there were very strict parameters on what Lars could and could not watch. VH1 somehow missed the parental guides. There was some special on the Kiss Live album, which I don't know the details of anymore. I remember them talking about the audience and how they really wanted to capture that, and they like talked about overdubbing the audience and made fun of it. I don't remember. I really don't. I was 13. I had a little boyfriend when I was 13 and he liked Kiss, so I liked Kiss. Try to explain to your parents that you like kids in Satan's service and say, yeah, no, it's totally innocent. I have to say that I didn't purposely pick Hollywood Bowl because I just did Beatles for Sale. But there are a lot of Beatles for Sale songs on here because this had just come out. So there's a bunch that wound up making it on here. Dizzy Miss Lizzy being one of them. I'm not complaining. I don't get sick of this song though. So I do think that this one, it does get critiqued, but so do all the covers. I mean, I don't like that it doesn't rhyme there right. Not a Beatles problem, just don't like it. Banana.
Wow. We'd like to sing. Wow.
It sounds like they're tuning guitars. This is something that I'm not looking up because we're too far past this and I should know. I've seen pictures. They definitely have other guitars out with them, right? A lot of musicians wind up tuning. There's no way that they could hear themselves tuning. So they have to just have other guitars come out. That has to be what it is. And Mal just brings them out or they're already on the stage because there's no way that they're tuning a guitar. The Beatles live, they can't hear it. Even with the, yeah. Okay.
Well, this song is called A Ticket to Ride.
Live version aside, I will always be happy to sing this song. I will always be happy to hear this song. I have a hard time picking a favorite Beatles song. I don't really have one, but this will consistently be one that I bring up if you're asking me what are my favorites or what do I have a particular affinity for. This song always does it. I'm surprised that they did so well with Paul's harmonies here because Ticket to Ride, live harmonies, and Babies in Black, I think Paul sometimes... Do not get mad. I am clearly a huge Beatles defender. Occasionally gets a little pitchy. I've heard it like 3 times. So occasionally is like, occasionally out of hundreds of shows, 3 times a little pitchy. He obviously hit it here, but you can still hear that it's Paul. And it's not just a noise. Stop talking. Comments from the peanut gallery? No, not really. Not very many. Just want to listen. Boom, boom. Always thinking of John's Blackpool performance. This. That's always how I listen to the song now. It really is a wall of screaming. I mean, it's just always there. It's just part of the song, right? Okay. We were almost to the end anyway, so we'll leave it. That was an accident. I'm sorry. I didn't mean it. Beetle gods, I didn't mean it.
That easy. All you got to do is clap your hands, stomp your feet.
I have to say that the wall of screams for this particular song actually is very fitting. When I think of Can't Buy Me Love, same thing with A Hard Day's Night. I just think of a movie. I guess I think of them running around a field, I guess. I think of it movie-wise and think of Beatlemania and the screaming. It's a natural backdrop. The audience would fit in just fine with the released version of this song. 'Cause I don't care too much for money. Money can buy me love. Sometimes I will add things like banana, banana. Even if the song doesn't do that, it's just a weird little Larsism. Take it up with my ADHD. I listened to this album quite a bit when I was preparing for the script. I started this 2.5 weeks ago. So I was listening to this quite a bit, and I'd heard this before, but sorry, I thought we had a cat situation. I was surprised by how much I really enjoyed it because I was just expecting to dislike it. I don't know why I felt like that. I guess maybe, does that lead credence to they won't want a live album of songs they already know in the UK? I don't know. Sorry, I'm looking at the screen. Sometimes I just look at the screen absent-mindedly when I'm thinking about stuff. And I was just thinking, do you think Paul got annoyed of singing that specific note over and over? And over and over and over again in that song.
Things we said today.
So Things We Said Today is not one of my favorite Beatles songs. So let's see if I can come up with anything to say about it. I'm sure I will. Let's see what other songs that we might have issues with. Maybe A Hard Day's Night. Maybe Help, just because I like listening to it. George, he sounds so cute. No, I'm not trying to infantilize him, but I love his voice. This is like an ongoing theme. It's very unusual. I always like that their intros are just, this song's on our next album. This song was on our first album. Yay! Be quiet, clap, stomp your feet. Okay. Gotta say, the bass line is really killing it for me. I do like this song. I just haven't listened to it a lot recently. Yeah, no, okay. So, I was going through this song the other day because this line, it was like silent in my house. And then suddenly I'm like, me, I'm just the lucky kind. Complete silence. And my partner, completely nonplussed. It must be hell living with me. I forgot songs mixed up because that's what I did. I apologize. There are only hundreds of Beatles songs, and occasionally I get them swapped. I wonder how difficult it was to decide exactly how to work on these vocals. Who to bring up where, because it sounds pretty good, but it must have been a debate. Ringo showing up with that cymbal. Roll Over Beethoven is one of my regularly top songs. I try to do wavy hands with some of this stuff, and then I realize that my fingers can't decide which part I'm going on, and then it doesn't look good in the edit. It doesn't do anything for any of us except for nausea. Gonna rent a little letter, gonna mail it to my local DJ. Back it up, you dumb fuck. Does my affinity for this song have anything to do with it being a George song? Obviously. Not gonna lie, I feel like they could have brought this song up higher. Doesn't this seem quieter than the other songs? It for sure is. There's got to have been a way for them to bring him up louder. No offense, Giles. I love you. I obviously, Does it seem quieter? Does it seem quiet? Come on. You guys have to agree with me. You like me, right? I know you do. If you're here still, you like me. perfect time to bring up the audience, because that is like the times where they'll scream even more and more and more and more because it's like time for him to dance and stuff. George is just so fun to watch perform. It is so fun he's captivating. Not that the Beatles themselves are captivating. Do I always have to make disclaimers? Yes. Early in the morning, I'm giving you a warning. Like a spinning top. Okay, back it up. This is some of the stuff that I noticed when I was listening to this, is they do just add on a little bit of differences to their live versions than what they have in the recorded, okay? That Paul's harmony is different as well. They had to switch up what they could here and there just to keep themselves from going insane from boredom. Even though this was the beginning of their US tour again, they're already exhausted, right? One thing, I think Billie Eilish did an interview with David Letterman on Netflix, and she said that there was a time they were like switching things up on stage just to keep themselves entertained, but she stopped doing that because that's not what the fans wanted. They wanted to go and hear the songs that they knew as they knew them. And so she stopped doing that. But it doesn't change the song. It doesn't change the experience for the fans. It just makes it like a little bit more emphasized. And I really like it. It's very fun. It's very fun. I think I've got a cat at the door. Okay, we're gonna pause real quick because I have to deal with cat stuff and I don't want to miss boys. Okay. Sing a song called Boys Swing Now! Okay, so boys, let's go. That is Roll Over Beethoven. Ringo really rocks these songs so well. These are just, they're almost made for him. I can see this song on this album, right? I think it's one of the most listened, maybe it's the most listened to. Okay, so Twist and Shout has 9,051,000 streams. And Boys has 8,875,000 streams. So it's not far behind Twist and Shout. Bongo Supremacy. I don't think people understand how difficult it can be to keep time and sing. Not a lot of drummers sing. Sometimes it's just a little awkward to have somebody behind a kit singing, but still, he does it so well. I love that he takes pains to, this is me being sentimental, I don't give a shit. I love that he takes pains to say things like, all right, George. He says it in a lot of the other jam songs that he has on the albums. He'll bring up George. And it's just really nice. I don't know. So little recognition for George. Love their friendship. Love their relationship. It's just like I said, being sentimental, it means nothing to the music, but it is a good interruption so we can listen to the song, isn't it? Yeah, that's tuning, right? They're just so funny. They're just so la la la. La la la. It must be so difficult because the rare ability to actually show your personality in the moments that they had, you know, he barely had it. The only time that they could ever really show their personality was during press conferences and little clips here and there. It's just cute, but it's kind of sad. He got this and he got 15 extra seconds to la la la. And that's John just being John.
And it's called Hard Day's Night.
You're gonna give me everything. Girl. So why on earth should I moan? Because when I get you alone, I'm gonna feel okay. You guys, it wasn't that subtle. His voice sounds like it's tired there. I don't think it is. It just sounds like it is a little bit. How are they not hoarse constantly? I mean, their voices have to be so strong. I can barely film talking for 3 or 4 hours. You know what I'm saying? One day every 3 weeks. But when I get home to you, I find the things that you do make me feel alright. They're not subtle at all, y'all. Not that his... Okay. It's not that his voice sounds tired, actually. It's just that it's shorter, that he's not holding the note as long. That's what it is, actually. You know I feel alright.
We'd like to do another film song now.
Do you think that they had to, not contractually necessarily, but Brian was probably like, mention the movie, you know, or do you think that they were just trying to find segues? Because I don't know, actually. I'm sure that I'll find out someday.
That means it's a new single. And it's a title ditty called Help.
Knowing how much John loves this song and continued to love this song, even though it was like him asking for help, he loves this song. And he always did. And that makes me love this song. When I was younger, so much younger than today, never needed anybody's help in any way. Sorry. Sometimes I'm just jamming and I like this song. I don't listen to Help the album very much, but when I do, it's like I play it straight for 2 days. I should be listening to the audience more. I'm just listening to them. Shouldn't have to say should or should not. Just whatever comes to mind, I guess. I'll be honest, the harmonies are underwhelming. I'm trying to be gentle, but this one, as far as the harmonies, George and Paul, it's... You didn't live, I didn't live.
Is he still laughing? I don't know what happened to make him laugh. If I can find it, I'll find it. He's still laughing. I think he's stopping now. Okay, he's back now.
That's one of my favorite things, is to find them joking with each other. All four of them. Well, poor Ringo. Ringo was not part of that. Ringo was too busy keeping the time. I love their stage chemistry. It's perfect. Help me. Help me.
The song's called All My Loving.
I love this song. And I think Paul does too, because he talks about it a lot. Not only the bass line, but the vocals are very fun. Paul regularly talks about the rhythm guitar, how fast John had to go throughout the whole song. He always found it impressive. Mix is a little funky on this one. Maybe we'll come around. We're only 30 seconds in, but not quite doing it for me right now. I've enjoyed this album so many times, but my opinions change every time. They always do, so. I think it's just that it's hard to try to find how to get the guitars up, because that bit is so important to the song, but it's not necessarily conducive to the live aspect of the song. You know what I'm saying? No, that doesn't make any sense to anybody. We've heard Paul's little yas a couple of times today, and it makes me very happy. George in the harmony. Why can't we always have George in the harmony?
Let's go, she loves you.
I cannot imagine how bored they were of this song at this point, but I still very much enjoy it.
Well, I saw her yesterday. It's who she's thinking of.
I don't think we listen to this song very often, and I just really listen to it because it's just like, oh, she loves you, yeah. I don't think people stop and listen to this song. And same with I Want to Hold Your Hand, but especially with She Loves You. Pride can hurt you too. Apologize to her because she loves you. I love that. You know, it's up to you. I think it's only fair. Pride can hurt you too. Apologize to her. I cannot imagine how much they hated this song by the end, though. Oh my God. If I were them, I would never want to hear it again. Yeah.
And we all hope that you've enjoyed the show. Have you enjoyed the show? Long tall Sally.
That is a weird closer. Not trying to be a dick. I would just add another song to the end. It's the perfect energy. I would end with the Beatles song. That's it. I don't know why. That is a talent that you wish you could freaking bottle, man. People have tried to biohack embryos to create genius and creativity. There's no amount of playing God that will bring it to me. And this is just a cover, but just the way that they sound, they couldn't hear themselves. I can feel the joy. I can feel it. That's a little different, that bit. What a fun end. Then, bow. Get them out. Get them out.
We got them out so good, so fast the first time, that they hung around for a couple of hours, the audience did, thinking they were still there. There was no possible way they could. We had the limousine doors open and everything. We didn't even take them out in the limousine.
I know I am toxic for liking this song, but I like it. I like this song, okay? Okay. If I have to tell you one more time, I'm just like talking, listening, talking. It's so annoying when I do that, sorry. Wish we could hear their harmonies here. Are they not harmonizing? Oh wait, no, they come after that. Did they just now remember that they had the harmony? Because that's like, I'm pretty sure that was wrong. You talking that way? They'd laugh in my face. Weird, because you can't really hear the bass here. I know that they were probably so tired of this song, but they do sound great when they sing it. They don't miss. This is obviously not the Sullivan Show, but I love this part of this song because I've associated it with the zoom in on Ringo in the Sullivan Show. You can really hear how sped up they are playing with this, but it doesn't sound bad or unnatural. And a lot of bands do speed up when they play live. That's my Beatlemaniac. Isn't that such a sweet, innocent love? Where it's just like, I just want to hold your hand. I remember being a teenager. I remember liking the Kiss Army. I remember joining the... Sorry, that's what I was talking about earlier.
Thank you. Thank you very much, everybody.
Every time they really put on the vernacular, the more slang terms from the UK, it makes me happy. I know very few. I'm learning.
Well, it took some honey from the tree.
Just it happened. I wasted my everybody's trying to be my baby joke on my last video. George sounds really clear here. I really think this song is just so joyous. You can tell, you can feel the love of the music and how happy they were and how happy the crowd was just by feeling the vibrations of the music. You don't actually have to hear them screaming. They're obviously there, but isn't it just like a garnish, right? On top of the joy that exudes from this song. 19 dates. How long are these dates? And are they just regular dates or are they... Oh, can't say that. Can I do?
Let's go, babies in black.
This is not one of those instances of pitchiness. I do think that the mix is a little weird, but it's not their fault. They're sharing a mic, so I'm assuming John is just closer to the mic. They can't hear themselves. They're just perfect right there. Distracted, just jamming. Sorry, I'm having a hard... It's just so... It's a fun listen. I'm having fun. Bow wow. Bow wow wow wow. I didn't film an outro there. So this is me filming an outro. I obviously really loved the album. I don't think it's a cash grab at all. Well, yes, I mean, of course it's a cash grab. It's capitalism. Of course it's a cash grab, but I don't think it's merely a cash grab, okay? Tell me what you think. Tell me about the vinyls that you've owned. Tell me about the bootlegs that you own. Tell me all of your thoughts. If you comment within the first day, I might respond. Go to my Patreon, patreon.com/LarsLand. Support me there, listen to more music, blah, blah, blah. Thanks for hanging out with me. I love y'all so much. And y'all come back now, you hear? Bye! Actually, before I head out, I just wanted to say that I know my videos are coming slower. They will continue to come slower because they're long and they take more and more work, even if they're staying about the same length. Each of them has been taking more and more work. And I'm working on one or I'm about to start one that I didn't anticipate ever. I mean, I anticipated doing it. I just didn't think I was going to be ready for it. I thought I was going to. Nope, don't say that out loud. But I've been going through a lot lately. So I just appreciate any patience and kindness and whatever, because we all have times when we're going through it. So, but I'm trying.
My sweet Lord. My Lord. My Lord. But it takes so long, my Lord. My sweet Lord.